Hi, and welcome back to the Beginning. Today I am joined by the children's author Lou Fraser, who's a very exciting up-and-coming voice in the children's writing world. And I'm just going to get right started into this interview and welcome you, Lou, to the Children's Media Conference and Back to the Beginning. And my first question today is, thinking back to your childhood, was there any kind of notable books or notable works of writing and reading that you remember as a child that you hold fondly?
Oh, it's very hard to narrow it down. I was a really big fan of adventure books. I loved anything with like a swashbuckling adventure. I loved pirates and mystery. I suppose some of the first books that really got me excited were C.S. Lewis, the Narnia books, and the possibility of going through the back of your wardrobe. And I think I spent a lot of time when I was sort of 6 or 7 inside my wardrobe, checking that the back wouldn't come out and being desperately disappointed every day that it didn't quite work like that. So I love those kind of things. I suppose that was quite an early age where I established I liked fantasy. I loved magic and wizards and witches. But yeah, C.S. Lewis is probably the one that sticks out the most at that point. And then when I got a bit older, when I got to sort of 12, probably Dylan Thomas, Under Milk Word. I had a brilliant English teacher and he introduced me to that. And I just fell in love with rhythm and rhyme and alliteration and, words that flowed, words that felt like a song. So, yeah.
And in school, were you dead set on becoming a writer? Like, what did your hobbies look like? Were you always writing? Or did that come later in life?
I was always, I read a little bit later on in life. I started to read a bit later than most children, and I went to school a bit later, and I'd always loved books, and I'd always loved reading or pretending to read. And I think I was probably about 5 when I first said that's what I was going to do. But like a lot of children, when you're that age, sort of the adults went, "Oh, that's lovely. What are you really going to do?" And so I was going to be lots of things. I was going to be a ballet dancer. That didn't work out. And Indiana Jones definitely was going to be an adventurer, and a vet. I love animals. I've still got loads of animals, and I was going to be a vet. I think very briefly, for about 10 seconds, I was going to be a lawyer, but, all the way through it, I always knew that my secret wish was to be a writer. It just wasn't something you ever really said, because grown-ups looked at you when you were very small and said that. I went, "Ooh, no, a proper job." And I was probably about that same English teacher who introduced me to Dylan Thomas. When I was about 12 or 13, I remember saying, "I've got a secret. I want to be a writer." And I think that was the first time I probably voiced it in seriousness. So I'd always wanted to be a writer. It was always the first choice. And I always kind of figured I would get round to it. I would do it in a way that might be published. But, time ticked away, and I wasn't published till I was, I think, in my mid-40s.
And leaving school, you went and did English at university. What was that like? And did that have a significant impact on your career today, would you say?
Well, the English was good, but the university bit was not so great. I kind of put myself through university, and I was by myself really, and it was hard work. I did loads of jobs. I scooped ice creams in a seaside town, and I cleaned loos, and I worked in a nightclub till 4 a.m. checking coats. So I did all these jobs to pay for myself to go through university. By the time I'd done all these jobs, there just wasn't enough energy left to enjoy university. So whilst a lot of my friends were out having a great time, I can't say, as wonderful as my university was, I can't say that I enjoyed it. It was just something I had to just get through to the end. And it's a real shame. And I really would love to go back and have the opportunity to do it all over again properly. And so I didn't love it. I loved the degree when I got to do it, but I didn't love it. It wasn't a great experience for me. But it did give me a huge amount of life lessons. I mean, I worked hard. I knew how, to save money and spend money and look after myself and budget. And I learned all those kind of skills. And those stood me in good stead, but mainly the work ethic. I've always been a hard worker. But certainly when you have to juggle 4 or 5 jobs and study, that really forces you at 18, 19 to figure out, what your priorities are. So it taught me a lot, and as I said, it stood me in good stead for later in life.
And sort of coming out of university, what was your first kind of job like?
I had a great job because I came out of university and, not surprisingly, checking coats and scooping ice creams did not cover student loans, not even close. So I came out of university and just thought, I have literally nothing. I think I had a suitcase and nothing else. And at that point, I didn't have a home to go back to either. So I just thought, I really need to earn some money and start paying back some of this student loan, because I don't like the idea of having one. I just need to get on top of that. And I just would like I'd like to see the world. I'd like to do some other, I'll work on a cruise ship. So that's what I did. And I got a job on a cruise liner. So I had somewhere to sleep. They had food. I got to see the world. And I got to earn money. And that was really hard work. I thought I'd worked hard before, but that's really hard work. But I was ready for it. And that was my brilliant time. University wasn't so great, but the working on the cruise liner for that was just fantastic. And a year later I came back and I had really done well at sort of saving up some money and I'd had a great time. So I loved that point of my life. I nearly didn't come back, actually. I nearly didn't come back, but I did in the end. I came back to England.
It's interesting as well, because all this is life experience and meeting people, and it's things to write about, essentially.
I mean, seeing all the different countries, meeting people from all walks of life. I got some advice when I was very young about making sure that I lived my life before I started writing. And I think for me that held very true. Meeting all these people, seeing all these different things, it definitely impacts the way I think about my writing and think about the world. It's a really good experience.
Yeah, and then you came back from the cruise liner, and where did you go from there?
Well, I worked for a fast-moving consumer goods company in marketing, and I begged them to give me a job. And they didn't give me a job in marketing. They gave me a job in not even quite telesales, sort of filling out notepads for people. And I just kept pestering them. And in the end, they sort of relented, I think mainly to make me shut up. And I worked there for a few years. And whilst I knew that my heart wasn't even vaguely in it, again, really good skills, really good things I learned. But my feet were itching the whole time. I just thought I don't think I'm cut out for this kind of sitting in an office on the phone all day or on a computer. It just wasn't me. But again, I learnt loads. But there wasn't really enough creativity in it. There wasn't what I was really passionate about. So I wrote all the time in the background. I carried on writing. I'd written, by this point, I'd written a couple of YA books and a middle grade. I didn't do anything with them. They were sat in carrier bags in the wardrobe. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with them. In fact, my husband now says we've got enough manuscripts to lag an entire loft, and we probably do. But, I enjoyed writing. It was a good experience to just keep writing. And I kept reading. I think that was the most important thing. And I read everything. I'm a really voracious reader. So from children's literature to Homer to things in translation to, all sorts. Read everything. That would be one of my biggest pieces of advice to anybody who wants to write. Just read. Read and read.
And from there, you got a job with Thomas the Tank Engine. So how did that come about and what was that like?
It did. I got to the point with my marketing job, I just thought, this is killing me. This is just not where I want to be. And I saw this advert and I thought I was going to go to London. A big, bright, shiny stuff. I'll go to London. This is going to be my moment. And I saw this job advertised in a paper for a licensing job, looking after some marketing, a bit of creativity, a bit of artistic stuff. I thought, well, okay, I'll go to the interview and find out more. And when I went, it was working for Britt Allcroft in offices that were actually originally her home, her house, and it was working on Thomas the Tank Engine. And I just thought, well, this is a bit of a change from where I've come from, but I'm completely dotty about children's books, and this is what I want to write one day. And maybe I could learn something. This could be good. And I didn't realise at the time how good and how great that opportunity was. And I ended up staying. Britt Allcroft was bought out, became another company, then another company, and every time it got bought out and Thomas got bought out, I got bought out with Thomas, and we just sort of morphed. We moved along until eventually I was running Thomas for the UK and Europe and Middle East and Asia, and I was over in New York a lot, and suddenly I found myself doing everything from visiting Shepperton and being in TV studios and looking at the scripts and the licensing program. It was amazing. It was a brilliant opportunity, and of course there was a publishing department that I had to oversee. Oh, just any excuse for me to zip in there and see what they were up to. And I remember thinking one day quite clearly, oh, this is what I should have pursued. I should have begged for a job in publishing. I loved it. I loved being in there looking at the manuscripts and all those books. So it was wonderful. Great opportunity.
And then from there, that transition to writing, how did that happen?
Well, I did the one thing that everybody was completely convinced I would never do, because I was a workaholic, 7 days a week, all sorts of hours, flying backwards and forwards from New York to England to Europe, and everyone said that she's such a businesswoman, she loves it so much, she'll never get married and have a family. But I did, and I became a mum, and the second I became a mum, everything changed, and I that was it. I upped sticks. I moved to the middle of nowhere in the countryside. My poor husband got taken with me, my long-suffering husband, and the great thing is, when I became a mum, you see children's books all over again and in a completely different light, and it was the most amazing. That was the most formative thing in my writing, actually, and I loved it, and so I carried on writing still, and doing nothing about it. And then I freelanced. I did all sorts of jobs. I wrote for magazines and glossy magazines and local schools and all sorts, anything to work around my daughter but still keep some pennies coming in. And then I got ill. I caught pneumonia, and my husband just said, "You're really horrible now that you're ill and you're on sick leave in bed for a month. You're driving everyone nuts. He brought me my laptop and said, why don't you mail some agents and please do something that is going to at least make you happy?" So I did. And it was literally a spur of the moment decision.
And sort of finding an agent and emailing agents, what was that whole process like? And sort of, what did it take from sat with your laptop, finding an agent, sending your work to an agent, to then like being published? What was that sort of timeline like, and what did that look like?
So bizarre and quick, and I picked a few agents. I think I picked 3, maybe 5, and I mailed them all pretty much at the same time. And one came back and thanked me for my artwork, which was funny because I'm not an illustrator. So I thought maybe they're not for me. And then one came back and said, "Yeah, we're interested. Let's have a chat." And then one came back and said, "Maybe, but I need to see more. I need some grit here. I need to see more." And that was the one that actually I was most interested in. And we had a meeting a week. I sent them all. We had a meeting a week later, and I was so terrified before the meeting. I literally stood in my kitchen sweating. I was just terrified. I was like, I can't even get into my office. I'm too terrified to take this call. My whole life feels like it's hinging on this moment. And actually, she was wonderful and lovely, and just put me at my ease. And she was the person I signed with, and she took a look at one of the pieces in particular and said, "Yeah, you're not there yet, but you can be, and it's not going to take much to get you where you need to be." And 2 weeks later, we worked on a manuscript for 2 weeks, and she took it to Bologna with some backup stuff of mine, and I was bought on the stand in Bologna in the first meeting. My first two books were bought, which is kind of it doesn't happen. And I remember standing in my kitchen at home, and my agent called me, and it was 9:15 in the morning, and she said, "That's it, you're going to be published." And I remember just sobbing in my kitchen and then running down the garden to tell my husband, who thought something awful had happened because I couldn't get the words out. And I signed a contract. I signed both my agency contract and my first publishing contract a few days later. It was so fast. It was so fast.
Yeah. I think it's that sort of sign of like you'd been working towards that moment for a long part of your life, and to then get there, it's pretty incredible. And your book that's done really, really well, particularly The Littlest Yak. What was the writing process like that for? Did you already have the idea from, like, obviously you'd been writing manuscripts before, or was it sort of during that process of like, okay, I found an agent, I'm going to write some new stuff now?
It was like most of my stuff. I always have these conversations with my agent and my publishers, and I go, "Well, we're going to write this. We're going to do this." And they go, "Yes, everybody's very happy with this." And then I walk away and I go, "I'm not going to write that. I'm going to do something completely different." So they are, again, very long-suffering. Most people seem to be in my life. And my agents and my publishers sort of went, "You're writing about a what?" And I went, "A yak. Writing about a yak. I know this is not what we said." And it came about on a plane trip. I was sat with my daughter, and the plane was delayed. We were just flying up to Edinburgh, actually for another book. And I looked across at her, and it was this awful, windy, rainy day. And I thought, oh, God, I'm not a great flyer, and I don't want to be stuck on a runway, and I'll just keep myself amused for 5 minutes. And I looked across at my daughter, and I just thought, when did she grow up? how did that happen? Wow, I must be getting old as well. But how did she grow up? And that was it. That the idea for somebody, and it was how much she wanted to grow up as well. And it was that dual idea of a parent watching a child going, please don't grow up, and a child going, I can't wait to grow up because then I can do everything. And it was those kind of two things. And within 10, 15 minutes, by the time the plane took off, I had almost the entire story in my head. And then I came back a week later and I wrote it. We looked at it. We decided we'd change the second half. I went away and thought about it for maybe a month or two, which I quite often do. And then I rewrote it. It went to London Book Fair and was pretty much bought on day one by Simon & Schuster, who literally just took one look at it and went, oh yeah. And that was it. We were off.
And kind of looking back on your career, what would you say is like a piece of advice you've learned that you would pass on to someone maybe watching this who wants to be a writer?
You know, I have lots of friends who are brilliant writers, but who give up. And I think it's such a massive shame. It's hard. The rejections are hard and you get a lot of them. Everybody, no matter how brilliant or great you are, everybody gets rejections. And I think as soon as you accept that and go, you know, it's almost not personal. It's sometimes that the publisher already has something like this, or maybe the publisher's schedule is full, or maybe they're looking for something specific, or maybe the timing is just not right. And what I used to do is people would say no to me when I was thinking about writing, and I go, oh, I'm going away for 5 years. I'm not going to write anymore now. And you know, I mean, I always would, but I took it quite hard. So I think my biggest piece of advice would be, if you really want this, you have to be tenacious. And you can't take no personally. By all means, be sad about no. Go and eat a bar of chocolate, watch TV, go for a run, do whatever it is you need to do. But come back the next day fighting, because it's just one no. And there are lots of other people out there. And maybe your manuscript isn't for this year. Maybe it's for the next year or the year after. I signed a book last year, a manuscript that I wrote years ago. And that the first time it went to London Book Fair, we had tons of interest, but nobody actually made an offer. It went in a drawer for a few years. And then somebody came to my agent and said, do you have something like this? And she went, well, it's funny you should say that. And again, they bought it on the spot. So sometimes it's just timing. There's no thing that you write that is wasted. You know, it just needs its moment. Just develop a thick hide, put the nose behind you.
We've looked back to the beginning and now looking forward. Where do you see your career going now? And where do you see the children's book industry going?
Oh, okay. Well, do you know something? The children's book industry is phenomenal at the moment. The range, the quality. I mean, I've heard it said several times that, it's a golden age of children's literature. And I have to say, I agree. I mean, what is out there for children, it's so far removed from what was available when I was little. It's just wonderful. Whatever sort of subgenre of children's literature you want, and no matter how confident or shy you may be with your reading, there is something for you. So that's brilliant. I suppose my worry would be going forward is, I hope we can sustain the quality of that, because it's a wonderful place right now, and I would hate for that to change. I think the only thing that I would like more for children's literature is for it to be more available for children. I'd like to see, like all writers, more libraries in schools, more accessibility. I think that's what we need to work on now. We've got the range. Now we need to make sure we can get it into the hands of the right people. And as for me, well, I've got a really busy schedule. I'm scheduled out. I think we've got another, 15, 18 books in total at the moment. I think I'm scheduled out to 2027. All of it's picture books. I've been asked to write other things, and I started writing other things. My original manuscripts were all YA or middle grade, and I would love to do some of that. But for now, my focus is on my picture books, particularly Gertie, the Littlest Yak. And we're going to be doing some different things outside of books with Gertie. So, yeah, it's so busy and it's so brilliant. But I think I'm also conscious that, it doesn't always last forever. So I'm just going to enjoy the moment whilst I can. And we've been really fortunate with our first few years. And and I'm just going to, I don't take enough time to celebrate it, and I'm going to try and do a bit more of that.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us today. I hope everyone at home found that really interesting and got to know more about your career and how it unfolded. And thank you for speaking to us, and I'll see you later.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye.